Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, and today I'm going to be doing another disturbing story reading similar to what I did with my Corey Ray video. Today I am going to be reading the infamous Blowfly Girl Story written by Blowfly Girl. This is the OG story. It is currently on Wattpad, uploaded by Jeff the Smile Dog. So if you guys want to come and check it out yourself, you can go and do that. But right now, I'm going to be reading the whole thing for you guys. And yeah, let's just get started. There's some text up here that says, "A twisted tale of a girl's fetish for maggots and decay. Last warning, it's gross." That is a warning to you guys as well. This story is fucking revolting. But if you guys are into that kind of thing, or you guys don't care, stick around and let's read Blowfly Girl. Sunday was warm and sunny, just how I always fantasized it would be, when I finally went through with it. I stared, walking to the dumpster again. I think about 2 p.m., and I was really excited and nervous. I felt butterflies in my tummy just anticipating what I was about to do. The dumpster is in the alley behind a restaurant near my house. It gets emptied on Tuesdays, so by Sunday it's pretty stinky and there are flies buzzing around, which means there are things rotting inside there, and that's just perfect for me. A few times in the past I climbed into the dumpster and masturbated. Nothing too intense. Most I'd ever done was take off my pants and hump against the dirty garbage bags. And one time I laid there with my legs spread, watching the flies land on me. So anyway, I walked down the alley to the dumpster, and as usual I made sure nobody was around, just to be extra careful. You have to go behind a tall wooden fence to even see the dumpster, and the restaurant is closed on Sunday anyway, so I knew I wouldn't be noticed. But this time, there's no way I want to be disturbed. I climbed up and over the side and onto my hands and knees into the mass of plastic garbage bags and other miscellaneous rubbish. The bags felt warm from the sun. The smell in there was extremely foul, much worse than usual, and I knew it was because of my rotting meat. I sat and tried to get myself to relax for a few minutes. There was no reason to hurry. When I was ready, I calmly took off my sandals, my jeans, and my panties, both pairs. I was wearing 2 pairs of tight panties with a bunch of my panty liners in my crotch, which keeps anything in my vagina from coming out when I move around. I was going all the way this time, so I went ahead and got completely naked. There was just a weird feeling being totally nude inside the dumpster. It seemed very erotic to me. The sun felt warm on my skin, especially my boobs, which pretty much never see the sun. I took a pair of rubber kitchen gloves out of my pants pocket and put them on. There was no way I could bring myself to actually touch a maggot with my bare hands. Laying with my back against the side of the dumpster, I fingered my pussy. I was already really wet. I knew I would be. The sensation of the rubber glove against my clit felt unusual, and I kind of liked it. I did that for a little while, just thinking about what I was about to do while staring at the smaller garbage bag in the far corner of the dumpster where I'd left it yesterday. I still felt the butterflies in my tummy. I keep thinking to myself I can't wimp out, that I had to go through with this. I wish for a moment that somebody else was there to force me to do it, but I decided that it was somehow much more sick and depraved to do it myself willingly. And I thought, yeah, that's me. That's what I want. I deserve this. And so I knew it was time to do it. I got back on my hands and knees and crawled to the other side of the dumpster. I sat down next to the garbage bag, gently picked it up, and placed it in front of me. The terrible smell was already stronger. Carefully, I tore the bag open. And there they were. They had to be thousands of maggots, kind of beige yellow with little black spots on them, all writhing in a large mass. I couldn't even see the rotting meat underneath them. Dozens more maggots clung to the inside of a plastic bag, which was coated with a thick, light brown slime. It was such a repulsive sight I thought I was going to throw up right there. But I didn't. I took a few minutes to get control of myself, fingering my clit while staring at the maggots, trying to work up the courage to continue. I scooped up some of the slime from my gloved finger and brought it to my nose. I knew what it was from the reading I had done before. It was digestive juices from the maggots full of bacteria. and it smelled just horrible. I thought to myself, that's what I'm going to smell like. That's the stench that's going to come from my vagina. I want that, I thought, spreading my legs wide apart. I dragged my slimy finger between my pussy lips. My clit felt like a hard little pebble beneath the slime. I didn't want to come right there, though, and I was still on the edge of gagging too. But I knew there was no turning around now, so I let my fingers slowly touch the top of the maggot mass. The maggots felt like nothing I'd experienced before. They seemed to have such energy, totally different from picking up an earthworm or something. And they felt so alive. I was fascinated and nauseated at the same time. Sneaking my fingers into the mass, I felt the solid meat beneath. Gently breaking it apart, I could see that the meat had turned gray except for the very center, which was still pink, and that the maggots had penetrated into it, but not too deeply yet. There was still plenty of food for my filthy little babies. I broke off a small chunk of meat that was covered on one side with maggots and held it for a moment while I fought back another urge to vomit. It was finally time, I thought. I leaned forward and, holding my pussy lips apart with one hand, I gritted my teeth and pushed the maggot-covered chunk of meat into my vagina. And then, totally without expecting it, I had an orgasm. A quick, sharp one that made me want more. And more was coming. I broke off another small chunk of meat along with another part of the maggot mass and pushed it inside me. This one had more maggots on it, and I stopped for a moment to see if I could feel them inside me. I wasn't sure I could, but it didn't matter. I wanted them all. I need to take them all inside me. With that thought, I went sort of wild. I started pushing bigger chunks of meat and maggots and even handfuls of maggots into me over and over. I was practically hyperventilating too. I wasn't thinking at all about the noise I must have been making, but now I could definitely feel the maggots squirming inside my vagina. Just the idea of it made me come again. Finally, once I had crammed all the rotten meat and all the maggots I could inside me, I felt so filthy, so disgusting, like I turned myself into some low, depraved sort of beast. And that made me so incredibly hot, together with the constant movements of the maggots inside of me. But it was time to go. Holding my hand over my crotch, I slowly crawled back to my clothes and managed to get dressed again without anything coming out. I put the gloves back into my pocket and climbed out of the dumpster, and right then I could hold back the revulsion of what I'd done no longer. Holding myself up against the side of the dumpster, I threw up. You ever thrown up while you were horny? It's weird. Walking home down the alley, I felt like I was in a daze. I kept asking myself, how could I have done this to myself? But then I'd asked why I'd been waiting so long. I had to walk slowly to make sure nothing got squeezed out of my vagina, but also to keep from coming again. I found myself amazed at the whole thing, that I'd stuffed the most intimate part of myself with these things that were too disgusting even to touch without gloves. And I was totally getting off on it. Once I was home, I locked myself in my bedroom, took off my clothes except for my double panties, and got into bed. I closed my eyes and just let myself feel the maggots squirming inside me. For a while I tried to watch TV, but I couldn't really pay attention to it. The maggots were too wonderfully distracting. I skipped dinner. Later on, when I really had to pee, I did it by taking down my panties and holding my hand over my crotch, wearing the rubber gloves, of course. The next morning, I called off of work after being awake most of the night. I mainly stayed naked in my bed all day, masturbating, barely getting up for anything. I wanted to do nothing but let my nauseating little babies grow inside my pussy. Pretty early, though, I realized that the smell was getting really horrible. I opened the window. I also wet a bath towel and stuffed it under my bedroom door. I didn't want my parents to get suspicious. A little later on, I realized that I didn't need my panties to hold the maggots and the meat inside me. The mass pretty much stayed in place as long as I lay kinda still. I thought, hey, I guess that means I'm infested, which made me come again. I was always right on the edge of orgasm, and it didn't take much to go over the edge. I also noticed that the maggots seemed to be more active if I kept my legs apart, and I realized that they probably needed to breathe. So that's how I stayed a lot of the time. I did get up and read my email and posted an update on my webpage, but I couldn't seem to think clearly enough to write much. Then I had to pee again. But I didn't want to get up, so I just peed in the bed. It made me cum. I just wanted to keep feeling the maggots moving, and they were. They seemed even stronger, if anything. I was totally in heaven with it. I didn't eat at all either. I heard my parents come home from work. During the evening, my mom said hello through the door and wondered why I was staying in my room like a hermit. I said I was reading a novel all the way through at once, which I actually do sometimes. She left me alone. I hope she didn't smell anything. I surfed the web for a while that night and looked at porn. I came a few more times. I decided to go ahead and take a shit in my bed right there where I was. That just made me more turned on that I ended up smearing some of the shit all over my thighs and my pussy and coming again. I noticed that the maggots started coming out a bit. Maybe they liked the shit. A couple times one would creep up my belly. I just flick it back down between my legs. I was getting tired at that point. It was really some time to get some sleep, and my vagina was throbbing and kind of sore from all the attention. But I was most worried about making sure my maggots could breathe while I slept. Somehow I managed to find the energy to place a chair on either side of my bed and use sheets to tie my ankles to them. That would keep my legs apart during the night. I pulled the blankets over myself and dozed off, laying in my piss and shit. For the most part, I slept through the night, but I kept waking up sweating, with my vagina throbbing worse. I knew I was getting a bad infection from this, but I didn't care. I was not thinking right. I could also feel the maggots crawling all over me. I guess I decided I liked that, and I'd play with my clit until I came again. I don't know if I realized at the time that I wasn't wearing the rubber gloves anymore. I'd fall back to sleep and wake up again later with little phrases running through my head. Other girls have babies, but I give birth to filth and decay. I'd keep thinking to myself. Or I'd say I'm probably ruining my womb and I don't care. I want to be ruined. I know I must have been hallucinating from the infection. I was hoping the maggots had given up on the rotten meat and were eating my vagina instead. My fingers were buried in my vagina with my fingertips against part of the meat. Whenever I pressed on it, the maggots would squirm faster and I'd climax again. I could do it over and over and keep coming. Finally, it was Tuesday morning and the sunlight made me wake up. I knew I was really, really sick at that point. I felt weak and dizzy. I knew I had a fever, and now my whole lower belly was sore and throbbing. Despite all that, I was still horny, and I was still right on the edge of coming. And then for some reason, all I wanted to do was see my maggots. I pulled the blankets aside, and I saw that I really did have maggots crawling all over my body. I was so whacked out, I loved it. But I also saw that I had a rash spreading over my tummy and my thighs, and I was soaked with sweat. And then suddenly, I wanted to see what it looked like between my legs. I sat up a little, picked up the hand mirror I have on the table next to my bed, and held it between my thighs. My pussy was totally gaped open. I'd never seen it like that before. It reminded me of a mouth in a sick, gagging expression. My inner lips were swollen and dark purple, almost black, while my outer lips were cherry red, and I was losing a layer of dead skin like a sunburn. A stream of the light brown slime was oozing from my vagina and down my butt crack onto the shitty mattress. Although I could still feel a large mass of maggots and rotting meat inside me. There were maggots everywhere between my legs, hundreds of them. And then I saw my finger in my pussy. They plunged deep into my vagina and dragged out a wad of slime and maggots, which I pressed hard on my clit. I remember having a huge orgasm right then, and I must have passed out. I think I was sobbing too, but I'm not sure. That's all I remember until I woke up in the hospital. I'll write about that later. And yeah, that is Blowfly Girl. That was the entire story of Blowfly Girl. It's pretty sick, honestly. Disgusting, but not too much. Not anything that I haven't seen before. And now we're going to be moving on to the second Blowfly Girl story, Dead Deer, second Maggot Story. This one is way longer, so just bear with me. A few of my old contacts have emailed me asking if I would post the story of my second encounter with maggots. It's been about 2 years since it happened, and I had written about it the next day on my Multiply page. Unfortunately, Multiply deleted that page. I lost the story and everything. I hadn't kept a copy because I did everything from a computer at work. It's all gone. A lot of detail fades over time, but I tried my best to rewrite the experience. Once I got started, some of it came back to me and I ended up really enjoying it. I'm glad I took the time. Hopefully, I haven't misremembered anything important. It happened on a Sunday afternoon while I was driving back home from Milwaukee. I can't remember now whether it was the weekend of Summerfest or Labor Day, but it was one of the two. As I mentioned, the following Monday night, I wrote the whole thing out at work and uploaded it to my Multiply page. I even got brave and took some pictures before my hands got too dirty. I uploaded a couple of those to the page too, only the ones that I felt safe showing. Not a lot of me in them. Not a lot of my flabby, disgusting, pale body in them, actually. I really wished I'd even those few back. Multiply didn't respond to my email when I asked. Anyway, I was driving home on some other highway besides 194 because I expected there would probably be a traffic jam after the state line. The weather was hot, humid, and sunny. I wish I remember what road it was, but I don't anymore. I haven't been back. I noticed a smell, a really bad smell. I knew it was the smell of something decaying. The smell got stronger, then faded away as I drove, but it kind of stuck to my nose. It stuck with me enough to get my imagination going, and after a few seconds I made the mental connection between the odor, a dead animal, maggots, and all of a sudden I was looking for a spot to turn the car around. It was a stupid thing to do, I know, but I didn't have anything specific in mind. Just the idea that there might be something putrid and interesting to see. I remember stopping on the shoulder of the highway at the point where the odor seemed strongest and felt kind of disappointed in myself. I'd been a good girl for a long time, ever since I recovered from my dumpster adventure with maggots that put me in the hospital. But now I was not feeling very much like a good girl. But my imagination was getting ahead of me. At that point, I still didn't know where the rotting smell was coming from. There was a ditch and a grass embankment along either side of the highway, a few patches of trees and cornfields. I knew from how strong the odor was that it had something to do with something nearby. But as I got out of the car and wondered how I could find it, I was clever enough to notice the direction of the warm breeze, so I knew I needed to be on the other side of the highway. I remember I was wearing a white hippie-like sundress with yellow and pink flowers on them and a pair of sandals. I knew the sandals weren't ideal for poking around in the tall grass, but I figured I wasn't going to try too hard anyway. Crossing the highway, I knew I shouldn't be doing this, but I was letting my darker side drag me along, pretending I couldn't help it. I wanted to convince myself that I was just curious, but I was getting horny just imagining what I might find. I looked all around me as I walked along the shoulder of the highway, trying not to miss anything hidden under bushes and stuff. For a few minutes, I tried to be sensible and forced myself to go back into the car and forget about it. I wanted to be good, I really did. I marched myself back across the highway. On the other hand, I thought, well, maybe it wasn't so bad just to look. Standing by the car, I figured I'd walked away once now. I could do it again. I noticed the canvas bag I left in my back seat, which had my beach stuff and my little camera in it. Maybe I could just take some pictures of whatever I found. I grabbed the bag and crossed the highway again to keep looking. After a few minutes of searching, it was pretty obvious to me that the smell wasn't coming from anything along the embankment. There was only one area left to search, and there I found what I hoped I would find. The grammar in this Wattpad thing is not very good, by the way, so sorry if I'm stumbling over myself. What I was afraid I'd find. At the corner of one of the cornfields, there was an old billboard, behind which was a patch of trees and bushes. The trees hid a shaded kind of secluded area right behind the billboard. Pushing past the bushes, I found, lying in the dirt, the decomposing body of a deer. The smell was almost more than I could handle at first, but I had to stop and stare. I had no idea whether it was male or female. Any difference had already been consumed by decay and maggots. I thought, oh no. The fur of the deer had begun to come off in places, especially around the head, revealing the skin underneath, which had a greasy-looking texture, mostly black, but with splotches of gray, brown, and greenish gray. The deer's belly had been split open almost the entire length from its chest all the way down behind between its hind legs. The deer was sort of on its side, so that its right legs were sticking up in the air and its left legs were on the ground. I guess that the deer might have been killed or died, and the farmer just dragged the carcass to a spot where it could rot away. The open belly of the deer was a huge mass of maggots. There had to have been thousands of them, grayish-brown maggots writhing and churning and filling every part of the open belly. Maggots even covered part of the ground on the side of the deer leaned toward, probably consuming whatever fluids that were oozing from the body. Little black beetles crawled among the maggots and dozens of flies buzzed around the carcass. I set my bag down and stood staring at the carcass, completely mesmerized. I felt myself beginning to get really horny again. This had to be one of the most disgusting, nauseating things I had ever seen. I want this, I thought. I want to be its whore because I'm a depraved, filthy pig, and this is what I deserve. I have no choice. These are the thoughts I'm having while I continue to stand there with my mouth hanging open. My dress is suddenly hiked up and one hand is in my panties. Stop now, I tell myself. Just take some pictures and leave. I want to take some really close pictures of the maggots, but I'm afraid to kneel down because of my dress. Of course I can't be wearing the dress. I thought it'll get dirty. And now I had my excuse to remove it. Within a few moments, I had taken all of my clothes off. The sundress and my underwear were draped over the branches of a large bush. I laid my beach blanket on the ground next to the deer. It felt so erotic to me to be nude outdoors so near to this nauseating, stinking carcass. Flies landed on my skin. It felt like they were inviting me. I took a bunch of pictures of the deer and the maggots, some really close up. I took the remote off my camera, set the camera down on one part of the frame of the billboard, and took some more pictures that showed some of me in them near the maggots. I even took one where I was touching the maggots with my finger. It felt warm, but I was really grossed out by it. I hadn't even seen a maggot since my last experience. A car went down the highway. It startled me, but not for long. I was feeling pretty secure now in my little hiding place with my new friend. The secluded area was almost disturbingly perfect. Even though I was pretending to be in control of myself, I kind of knew from the moment I'd found this deer that I was going to do something stupid. I stood up and stepped over the carcass with one leg. Staring down into the seething mass of maggots, I felt like such a worthless, perverted piece of shit to be aroused by the sight. But I was so aroused, I was so soaking wet. There was no way I could control what I did now. I had to feel them again. I needed it. I squatted down above the carcass, feeling one of the deer's hind legs against my lower back. Forcing back the urge to gag again, I removed my fingers from my vagina and sank them into the thick mass of maggots in front of me. I could feel the heat below the surface of the mass as they squirmed around my fingers. I stopped for a moment to think about what I was doing, but like an addict, I couldn't stop myself. I really tried. Well, sort of. Naked with a decomposing animal carcass staring at the writhing, disgusting maggots, I felt like I'd never been so horny in all my life. I lifted my hand out of the maggot mass and held it in front of my face, looking at all the maggots that clung to my skin. I felt my stomach rising into my throat and barely avoided gagging once again. Instead, I slowly brought my hand down between my legs and pressed the maggot-covered fingers between my vaginal lips. No. I whispered to myself, beginning to weep a little. My eyes were tearing up. Oh, how could I do this to myself again? I'm not a human being, I thought. I'm lower than a pig. I'm not even an animal. I'm garbage. I'm waste. My heart was pounding and I could feel maggots growing between my fingers and my pussy, and it's disgusting and it feels so good. And then I had a sudden realization that I had no idea what kind of maggots these were. They might not just eat dead tissue like blowfly maggots. The thought made my clit pulse hard against my hand. Oh no, I thought, dropping onto my knees so I was kneeling just above the carcass with my legs spread wide apart. These maggots, they might bite me. They might burrow into me, infest me for real. I felt so much need right there. I scooped up a handful of maggots in my shaking hand and pressed them against and into my vagina. I began to orgasm. I felt so good and so disgusting at the same time. I didn't want to stop, so I shoveled another handful of maggots into my vagina, and then another, and then another. I plunged my hand back into the maggot mass, deeper this time, grabbing and tugging at the decaying, partially liquefied guts beneath. No longer covered by the maggots, the odor of the decay was so strong it forced me to drop the unidentifiable glob of entrails I held in my hand. But I should have that inside me too, I thought. It's what I need, what I deserve. I picked the repulsive piece of deer guts back up and pushed them entirely into my vagina, crushing and pushing aside numerous maggots. I was panting now, feeling drunk with arousal. There was no stopping myself now, I knew, as I allowed myself to sink my flabby fat ass down into the carcass, burying my pussy in maggots and decay. I could feel both solid and soft things beneath me, along with the constant wriggling of thousands of maggots. I began to hump my pussy against something firm, whatever it is, buried deep under the maggots. I felt like I was out of my mind, now totally reveling in the horror of what I was doing to myself, grinding my hips and thrusting my infested cunt into the carcass as hard as I could. Maggots were oozing out of my vagina as I thrashed about. I did my best with shaking hands to cram them back inside. I clutched at anything beneath me, maggots, guts, even some of the little black beetles, anything to pollute myself inside even worse. I kept humping and humping against the carcass, unable to stop even if I wanted to. A new strong orgasm overcame me, making my head spin. As I climaxed, I let myself slowly fall forward, my tummy coming down to lie on the belly of the carcass. With my fat ass still humping uncontrollably against the rotting guts, I realized my face was now close to the deer's head. With my finger, I gently poked at the maggots infesting the deer's eye socket, watching them writhe as my orgasm faded. And then I surprised myself. I usually feel really bad after I've done something sick and perverse, kind of a mix of defeat, guilt, disgust, disappointment. This time I didn't. I felt filthy, but still very erotically filthy. I was at the bottom. I'd become the repulsiveness I was getting off on. Reluctantly lifting myself off of the deer carcass, I sat for a few minutes, catching my breath, feeling both the exhausted throbbing between my legs and the crawling of the little beast still clinging to my skin. I wiped off my hands and on the beach towel and picked up the camera remote. I took a couple pictures of myself with my boobs, my belly, my crotch, and my thighs completely smeared with the disgusting slime bits of decayed deer guts and lots of maggots. I could still feel maggots moving inside my vagina too. As violent as I'd been, I hadn't killed them all. Infested inside and out, I didn't want the feeling to go away. Moving as carefully as I could to keep from squeezing anything out of my vagina, I got dressed without removing any of the filth on me. I drove the rest of the way home with a beach towel covering the driver's seat. I had my fingers in my panties several times, playing with my clit and feeling the tiny monsters that continued to squirm between my legs. I didn't come at all, but I stayed close to it. Incredibly, I never became sick or had an infection from the experience. Maybe because I got into the bathtub and cleaned myself really well as soon as I got home. No sundress, bra, panties, and beach towel all went in the trash. No big loss. What I really miss are the pictures that I took. And that's it. Those are both the Blowfly Girl stories, Blowfly Girl and Dead Deer. The Dead Deer story is, it had a lot of grammatical mistakes, but I'm pretty sure it's very similar to what the actual author wrote. I don't know if I'll be doing more of these, weird, readings of, cursed and, disturbing things on Reddit. But if you guys, or Reddit, or, Wattpad, or whatever on the internet. Oh, excuse me. But if you guys actually do enjoy these types of videos and want to see me read more disgusting and disturbing stories, leave a comment down below. I'll read it, and I will comply. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.